Somewhere in what is now Iraq, roughly 50,000 years ago, someone died. And instead of leaving the body where it fell instead of walking away, the way every other creature on Earth would someone stopped. They dug. That single decision to dig a hole in the earth and place a body inside it deliberately may be one of the most important moments in the entire history of our species, not because of what it built, but because of what it revealed about who we already were. In Shanidar Cave, in the mountains of northern Iraq, archaeologists made a discovery that changed everything we thought we knew about ancient humans. A Neanderthal body, deliberately placed in the earth. Positioned carefully, not dumped, not abandoned, placed. And around it, traces of pollen from at least 8 different flowering plants. For decades, this discovery was known as the flower burial. The idea that a Neanderthal had been laid to rest with flowers deliberately gathered, deliberately placed stunned the scientific community. Because Neanderthals were not supposed to be capable of this. They were supposed to be primitive, reactive, focused entirely on survival. But survival does not dig graves. Survival does not gather flowers for the dead. Researcher Ralph Seletsky, who excavated Shanidar Cave in the 1950s and 60s, spent years trying to make sense of what he found. The pollen clusters were concentrated specifically around the body not scattered randomly the way wind or animals might deposit them. Someone had put them there. Someone had chosen those particular plants, in those particular quantities, and placed them with a particular person. We will never know why those flowers. We will never know what they meant to the people who placed them. We don't have their language. We don't have their beliefs. We have only the pollen, still preserved in the soil after 50,000 years, still quietly telling us that something happened here that was more than survival. But here is what we do know. Burial the act of deliberately interring a body requires a set of cognitive abilities that separate us from almost every other species on Earth. It requires the understanding that a person who was alive is now permanently gone. It requires the ability to project forward to imagine a future in which that person will not return. It requires a concept of the individual as meaningful beyond their immediate utility to the group, and it requires the impulse to mark that meaning in a physical, permanent way. These are not simple things. Most animals show signs of distress around the dead. Elephants touch the bones of their fallen. Chimpanzees carry deceased infants for days. Crows return to places where companions died. But none of them bury. None of them dig a space, place a body, and mark it as sacred. Only we do that. And the moment we started doing it the moment that first grave was dug in the earth something shifted in what it meant to be human. Because burial is not just about the dead. It is about the living. It is a statement, made by the people who remain, that a life mattered. That a person was more than a body. That their absence deserves acknowledgement. Archaeologist Paul Pettit at Durham University has argued that the emergence of burial marks a critical threshold in human cognitive evolution, not because the dead benefit from it, but because the act of burial requires the living to hold two truths simultaneously: that a person is gone, and that they still matter, that the relationship continues even after the physical presence ends. This capacity to maintain a bond with someone who no longer exists in the present is the foundation of everything that followed. Religion. Because if the dead still matter, then perhaps death is not the end. Art. Because if a life deserves marking, then perhaps other things deserve marking too. Storytelling. Because if we remember the dead, then we can pass that memory to people who never met them. And eventually, history itself the entire human project of recording what happened and who was here. All of it traces back to a grave in a cave, to someone who stopped when they could have walked away. We don't know who they were the person who was buried, or the person who buried them. We don't know their name, their face, their story. We know only that they existed, and that someone who loved them refused to let that existence end in silence. 50,000 years later, we are still doing the same thing. Still digging, still placing flowers, still refusing to let the people we love simply disappear into the ground without acknowledgement. The first burial was not a religious act. It was not a cultural act. It was a human act, perhaps the most human act of all. The decision that love does not end just because a person does.